welcome everyone to today's video on the topic of memory encoding. This video is a part of the memory video series on our channel. You can find the full list of all the topics that we will cover in this series below in the description box and also pinned to the comment section as well. Now, in order to fully understand all the topics that we cover in this video series, consider watching the first short introductory video discussing what is memory and what are the key stages of memory formation. You can find the link of this video in the description below as well as pinned to the comments section, and you can also find the video by clicking the I button on the top right corner of your screen. However, if you already know this particular topic, or if you can define memory and name the key stages of the memory formation, then consider continuing ahead with this video. With that said, let's proceed. So in today's video, we will cover the following aspects. We first start the video by answering the question, what is encoding? Following this, we learn about the different types of memory encoding. And finally, we end the video by briefly covering the factors that negatively impact successful memory encoding. So without further ado, let's begin the video. So in our previous video, we learned about what is memory, and we looked at an overview of the main stages that constitute the process of memory formation. These included the stages of encoding, storage, and retrieval. In today's video, we will look at the first stage of memory formation, which is encoding. So, what is encoding? Now, encoding refers to a process in which we perceive the environmental stimuli in our surrounding and we change it or transform it in a form that can be stored in our brain, in our memory. Now, encoding as a process is very important because it is the first stage of memory formation, which means that the development or the formation of memory completely depends on successful encoding. So now that we can define encoding as a process, let's proceed and learn about the different types of memory encoding. Now, there are 6 main types of memory encoding. They are visual encoding, acoustic encoding, semantic encoding, elaborative encoding, tactile encoding, and finally organizational encoding. Let's dive a little deeper into each of these types of encoding and understand what they are. So, as in the name, visual encoding refers to actively perceiving and encoding the information perceived visually. Such as in this video that you're looking at the current moment. You are visually perceiving a fruit bowl, you're perceiving the colors of the fruit as well as the action of tossing the fruits in the bowl and so on. Now, the information that is visually encoded is usually stored in what we refer to as a visuospatial sketchpad in the working memory before we encode it and consolidate it to be stored in the long-term memory for future retrieval. Now, we will cover the concept of visuospatial sketchpad and working memory in much more greater detail in the upcoming videos in this series. However, for now we know that visual encoding is encoding any information that is perceived visually and that it is stored momentarily in the visuospatial sketchpad in our working memory before we consolidate it to be stored in the long-term memory. Now let's move on to the next type of encoding, which is acoustic encoding. As in the name, this type of encoding focuses on actively encoding the auditory information. Musicians, for example, engage in active auditory encoding when learning to play a tune or a note, and actively recalling from their auditory encoded information during a performance. Like the visually encoded information, auditory information encoded as a part of auditory encoding is also stored momentarily in our immediate memory store, where we actively manipulate it before we consolidate it into our long-term memory for future retrieval. This immediate space is referred to as the phonological loop, a concept which we will cover in greater detail in this series in future videos. Furthermore, The next type of encoding we look at is referred to as the semantic encoding. This specific type of encoding involves encoding sensory input which has a specific meaning or semantics based on the context in which you are encoding it. For example, the words write and write both have the same pronunciation, but when said in the context of an assignment, you know it means writing the activity. And when said in the context of a conversation pertaining to a decision, you know it means the evaluation of right or wrong. This is referred to as a semantic encoding. Usually, it is easier to recall semantic encoding as opposed to non semantic encoding, especially if you attach contexts of emotional aspects to it. Let's move on to the next type of encoding, which is the elaborative encoding. Now, elaborative encoding involves actively encoding information that is added on to already existing and already consolidated information. This type of encoding specifically occurs when you're trying to learn something new. For example, you might have already encoded in the past that Brussels is the capital of the country Belgium, and then learn that Belgian chocolates are very famous. You can add this newly encoded information about chocolates to the information that you have had in the past about Belgium's capital. This is an example of elaborative encoding. Let's move on to the next type, which is tactile encoding. Now, the word tactile means the sense of touch. Tactile encoding therefore refers to encoding information that is perceived through the sensation of touch. An example of such encoding is when you are encoding the information about different textures of cloth, such as cotton versus velvet, or those of fruits, such as apple versus pineapple. In tactile encoding, systems like the somatosensory cortex play a key role. Additionally, aspects like odor or smell can aid in enhancing the consolidation of tactile encoding. Moving on to the last type of encoding is the organizational encoding. This type of encoding refers to or occurs when you are organizing the information you have encoded in the past in specific categories. For example, you might have previously encoded that an apple is a fruit and a dictionary is a type of book. During organizational encoding, you might reorganize this information under specific categories such as fruits are encoded in the category of fruits and dictionary in the category of books. Alright, so let's now briefly review the various factors that can negatively impact our encoding. Note that in this video, our goal is to become familiar with some of the most common factors that can impact our encoding process. In future videos, we will dive deeper into each of these topics, but for now, let's review briefly each of the factors that can negatively impact memory encoding. The first factor is sleep deprivation. Now, sleep deprivation is one of the key factors that negatively impacts memory formation and consolidation overall. Lack of sleep or lower than recommended number of sleep impacts all forms of memory encoding in waking hours. And it also causes a lot of memory recall issues as well. This happens primarily because of lack of encoding. So if you don't encode the information because of sleep deprivation, you also lack the consolidation of that material and therefore lack the recall of it. The next factor that negatively impacts encoding is the condition of depression. Now, neuropsychological and neuropsychiatric conditions such as depression or anxiety also impacts encoding and the short-term memory faculty. This mainly occurs due to the difficulty that one faces in perceiving information clearly, focusing or actively attending to the information, etc., which impairs the ability of encoding. Paying attention to the information that you want to encode and store in your memory is the number one key factor that actively helps you in successful encoding. And conditions such as depression or anxiety impair that ability, leading to negative impacts on the process of memory encoding. Moving on, conditions like Alzheimer's, that is, neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's, tend to degenerate parts of the brain, such as the medial temporal lobe, that in turn impacts memory formation overall, including the encoding process of memory formation. So, this condition also negatively impacts the process of memory encoding and memory formation, therefore. Furthermore, the factor pertaining to excessive multitasking is also one of the key factors negatively impacting encoding. Now, as trivial as this point might sound, multitasking requires your attention to be distributed across many different tasks. Successful encoding occurs only when, as we discussed before, we have our full undivided attention on the information to be encoded. Thus, multitasking often impairs memory encoding. This is the same reason why you might forget a few items on your grocery list when you get to the store, because you might have made the list while you were searching for your car keys, while you were talking on the phone, or doing other things. All right, so let's look at the last factor that negatively impacts memory encoding. The last factor that negatively impacts memory encoding is referred to as the drug abuse. Now, while drug abuse has many negative impacts, negatively impacting memory encoding, thereby disrupting the formation of memory, is one of the prime negative impacts of drug abuse. In that, specifically, consumption and acute administration of drugs in the category of opioids or cannabis, cocaine, nicotine, and alcohol actively disrupt the memory encoding processes. Alright, that is the end of the video. Thank you for watching and thank you for your attention. If you found value in today's video and you want to follow through the entire memory series as well as upcoming videos in this particular channel, please make sure to subscribe to our channel Braincyclopedia. Also, like this video, send us a comment below and share this video with somebody who might benefit. It really encourages us to keep delivering useful content in the field of cognitive sciences. Also, make sure to press the bell icon for all updates about upcoming videos. We are on all different types of social media platforms, so make sure to follow us on our social media sites on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find the links of these sites in the description below as well as in the channel banner. Finally, you can find the list of all the videos that we will cover in this memory series in the description box as well as pinned to the comment section. See you in our next video.